and welcome to Supposedly Fun. My name is Greg, and I am here today to talk about the American Library Association's Andrew Carnegie Medals for Excellence in Fiction. They do this every year, and usually I, for whatever reason, don't start following the process until January, because I know that's when the prize is announced. So, and because the long list is really large, I don't tend to pay very close attention to it. But this year, I thought, why not do things a little bit differently? Since I do ultimately pay attention to this anyway, why not pay attention to the long list, see if there's some books that slip through the cracks for me. There are some books that I'm not familiar with on this list, and maybe it will help me get a sense of what could be coming as we get into best of the year season, and help me predict what might make those. I don't really release official predictions, but I like to do it in my head. So it could be helpful for that. And also, I did a video recently about books that could be contenders for the Pulitzer Prize next year. I'll link that video down below, as well as my reaction to the Booker Prize shortlist and the National Book Award shortlist, because those are coming up, and some of those books are on this list. So synergy. But in that video, I talked about how the Pulitzer one, I talked about how it's an interesting time to think about that because we haven't gotten a lot of these. The same day that video posted, or maybe it was the day I filmed, I don't remember which at this point, the long list for the Andrew Carnegie Medal was announced. And I am actually sort of glad that it came out after I had already filmed, because it allowed me to really do that video without having an additional long list or anything like that to look at. So another reason to do this is I love the American Library Association, and supporting your local library is a great thing to do. So just think about it, and remember, always support your local independent bookstores and support your library. Your library does great things for your community. Some notes before we really get into this. There are 45 books on both the fiction and the nonfiction list. Most of those are on the nonfiction list, but 21 of them are on fiction. So in order to do this and keep the video from getting really long, I am going to give some short shrift to books that are already familiar or that I have already spoken about, say on the Booker Prize long list or short list or anything like that. That's another reason those videos will be down below, but I'll indicate that when we get to them. And the short list will be announced on November 18th. At that point, they go down to 3 books only, or 3 each for fiction and nonfiction. So on November 18th, this list of 21 books will be whittled down to just 3. And then we will get the winner on Tuesday, January 27th, 2026. That is usually tied to a conference for the ALA. And they also announced the ALA notable titles for fiction and nonfiction and other categories then. And every year I have done a reaction to the ALA notable books for fiction. So in January, you have that to look forward to, and I have that to look forward to as well. Let's start talking about these books. It seems like a very interesting list. There is a pretty good mix of translated books, English books, and fiction books that sort of lean into genres and all that stuff. We love a well-rounded list. So let's start talking about these books. The first one that was longlisted for the Andrew Carnegie Medal for fiction is The Unworthy, a novel by Agustina Basterica and translated by Sarah Moses. Agustina Basterica, she wrote a book that a lot of people have liked, and I'm blanking on the name, so I'm pulling it up. Tender is the Flesh. I've heard a lot of people say that they loved that book. A lot of people have also told me that that book is very disturbing. And for the disturbing part, I have stayed away. And for that reason, I knew that she had the author of Tender is the Flesh had a new book out, but I didn't actually look very closely, because I figured if that one was kind of disturbing, this one probably follows suit, and maybe it's just not for me. By the way, I should also mention there will be links to all of these books on bookshop.org in the description box. So if you want more information about them, you can also go there, or you can purchase them there, or, as I said, you can support your local library. Whatever you would like to do. Here's what this book is about, since I haven't really paid attention to what it is about. The long-awaited new novel from the author of global sensation Tender is the Flesh, a thrilling work of literary horror about a woman cloistered in a secretive, violent religious order while the outside world has fallen into chaos. From her cell in a mysterious convent, a woman writes the story of her life in whatever she can find, discarded ink, dirt, and even her own blood. A lower member of the sacred sisterhood, deemed an unworthy, she dreams of ascending to the ranks of the enlightened at the center of the convent and of pleasing the foreboding superior sister. Outside, the world is plagued by catastrophe. Cities are submerged underwater, electricity and the internet are non-existent, and bands of survivors fight and forage in a cruel, barren landscape. Inside, the narrator is controlled, punished, but safe. But when a stranger makes her way past the convent walls, joining the ranks of the unworthy, she forces the narrator to consider her long-buried past and what she may be overlooking about the enlightened. As the two women... Ignore my calendar. As the two women grow closer, the narrator is increasingly haunted by questions about her own past, the environmental future, and her present life inside the convent. How did she get to the sacred sisterhood? Why can't she remember her life before? And what really happens when a woman is chosen as one of the enlightened? That does sound really interesting. If you have read The Unworthy, I would be curious. Because a lot of people told me Tender is the Flesh is very disturbing, and for that reason, I decided not to dip in. Is The Unworthy more of the same? If it is disturbing, I don't know that I have the stomach for it. But it does sound really interesting, or at least potentially interesting. So if you have read it, let me know what you thought of it. The second book that is on the long list for the Andrew Carnegie Medal for Fiction is one of the ones that I'm going to skip over just a bit, and that is A Flashlight by Susan Choi. This is on the shortlist for the Booker Prize. So because this has been on other prize lists, again, you can get more information about this book down below. You can either click on the video about the Booker Prize shortlist or just the link to bookshop.org. I will say this is shaping up to be one of the most recognized books of 2025, alongside Audition by Katie Kitamura. And at some point, I would like to catch up to it. I admit I don't feel as interested in the subject matter, but I do feel interested in the fact that this is one of the most recognized books of the year so far, and we'll see. I would not be surprised if it's on, say, the New York Times Book Review's top 10 books of the year, but we'll find out about that later this month when they actually announce the list. So let's jump to the next book, which was a very pleasant surprise for me. It's The Correspondent by Virginia Evans. I did read this book earlier this year, and when Joel and I did our mid-year wrap-up, it was one of my favorite reads of the year. Joel has since read it himself, but he had not read it at that time. You know what? I'll link the video of our best books at the midpoint of the year down below, so you'll have another avenue. This is a very interesting book as well, because The Correspondent has been a pretty resounding word-of-mouth success story. When it came out, it had a sort of quiet release, and then people started sort of recommending it. I noticed it because Ann Patchett gave it a very strong recommendation in one of her Laydown Diaries videos for her bookstore, Parnassus. And that's what made it jump out to me. But months after it was initially published, it actually made it onto the New York Times bestseller list. And that just goes to show that this is a book that people are finding and discovering and coming to later. And it didn't have much of a presence in mid-year best of lists, but I wonder if that's something that's going to change as people are sort of catching on to the charms of this book. I would actually really like to see that. I think it's a very beautiful and subtle book. It is an epistolary novel about a very complicated woman named Sybil Van Antwerp, and I think it's absolutely brilliant and beautiful. And in the interest of saving time, I will leave it at that for The Correspondent, but it is definitely a book that I recommend to you with my whole heart, and I would love to see it recognized even more. So this is also a book that had not been on my list of Pulitzer possibilities for next year, because next year they announced the prize for books that were released in 2025. But I did add it to my list once it was on the long list for the Andrew Carnegie Medal for Excellence in Fiction. It does feel like something that could end up being on the shortlist for the Pulitzer. And, I don't know if it would win, but it does feel like exactly the type of thing that might be recognized. And I was a little ashamed that I had overlooked it. So the Andrew Carnegie Medal also helped me add this to my list of Pulitzer possibilities. And Great Black Hope by Rob Franklin is another book that I had not included before, and I added it once I saw it on this list. Now, I do have access to the audio of this book. I would really like to catch up to it. And it sounds very interesting. I believe I know the premise, but I'm going to read you what it says about it on Bookshop. So just in case I make a mistake. A gripping debut from an electrifying new voice about an upwardly mobile and downwardly spiraling black man caught between worlds of race and class, glamorous parties and sudden consequences, a friend's mysterious death, and his own arrest. An arrest for cocaine possession on the last day of a sweltering New York summer leaves Smith, a queer black Stanford graduate, in a state of turmoil. Pulled into the court system and mandated treatment, he finds himself in an absurd but dangerous situation. His class protects him, but his race does not. It's just weeks after the death of his beloved roommate, Elle, the daughter of a famous soul singer, and he's still reeling from the tabloid spectacle, as well as lingering questions around how well he really knew his closest friend. He flees to his hometown of Atlanta, only to buckle under the weight of expectations from his family of doctors and lawyers and their history in America. But when Smith returns to New York, it's not long before he begins to lose himself in his old life. Drawn back into the city's underworld, where his search for answers may end up costing him his freedom and his future. Smith goes on a dizzying journey through the nightlife circuit, anonymous recovery rooms, Atlanta's black society set, police investigations and courtroom dramas, and a circle of friends coming of age in a new era. Great Black Hope is a propulsive, glittering story about what it means to exist between worlds, to be upwardly mobile yet spiraling downward, and how to find a way back to hope. I mean, doesn't that really sound interesting? I would love to catch up to this book. I feel like I'm much more interested in catching up to Great Black Hope than I am in catching up to Flashlight. Being honest, I have more of a sense of obligation to catch up to Flashlight, but I actually want to catch up to Great Black Hope. Again, being honest. And if you've read it, I would love to hear what you thought of it. The next one is another book that I've read, Hunchback by Sao Ichikawa and translated by Polly Barton. This is a very short book. Let me see how many pages it is. 112. I got it from the library. It had been on the long list for the International Booker Prize, and it was on the long list for the National Book Awards Prize for Translated Fiction. I don't remember right now if it had made it onto the shortlist. It's a prickly book. It's not one that everyone is going to love, but it is very interesting. So the protagonist is someone who was born with a congenital muscle disorder. She lives in a care home, and her ability to live life and experience life is very limited, especially not just because she's in the care home, but because of the limitations of her body. So she has a secret Twitter account where she will post things that seem sort of shocking and abrasive. But since nobody really follows, she feels free to use this. And ultimately, it is a book also written by someone who has a congenital muscle disorder about disability in the world and privilege in the world and how those two things intersect and smash up against each other. And it's very interesting, again, because of the prickliness of the protagonist and the way she almost delights in being sort of unlikable, even though she is very generous with money. It's very interesting, but it's definitely not a book that is going to be for everyone. So I think what I'm saying is I would not be surprised if it ends up not making it onto the shortlist for the Andrew Carnegie Medal. But I found it to be a book that was very much worth my time. And maybe that's true for you as well. Maybe it's not. But I feel like you should just know it's not a book that will be for everyone before you decide to pick it up, but I did enjoy it. The next book is We Do Not Part by Han Kang and translated by Yi Wan and Paige Ania Morris, Han Kang is obviously very notable because she won the Nobel Prize for Literature last year. I will link my reaction to that announcement in the description box down below if you'd like to check that out. I've only read one of her books. It was The Vegetarian. It was so disturbing that I immediately traded it in at my local used bookstore, I admit. But it is something that has haunted me ever since I read it, and I've been thinking about it. So I think it was a good Nobel Prize win. And other people who have been reading Han Kang either before she won the Nobel or after she won it have indicated that We Do Not Part is a very good place to go, especially if you have read The Vegetarian. So it is one that I might catch up to. I admit I don't have a timeline for when that might happen, but it sounds really good. And it has been in the mix for best books of the year, so I won't be surprised if we see it on at least some of the lists that will be coming soon. Here's what it's about. One winter morning in Seoul, Kyung-ha receives an urgent message from her friend In-seon to visit her at the hospital. If I'm mispronouncing these names, please forgive me and let me know how to do it correctly in the future in the comment section. In-seon has injured herself in an accident, and she begs Kyung-ha to return to Jeju Island, where she lives, to save her beloved pet, a white bird called Ama. A snowstorm hits the island when Kyung-ha arrives. She must reach In-seon's house at all costs, but the icy wind and squalls slow her down as night begins to fall. She wonders if she will arrive in time to save the animal, or even survive the terrible cold that envelops her with every step. Lost in a world of snow, she doesn't yet suspect the vertiginous plunge into darkness that awaits her at her friend's house. Blurring the boundaries between dream and reality, which is sort of a Han Kang specialty, We Do Not Part powerfully brings to light the lost voices of the past to save them from oblivion. Both a hymn to an enduring friendship and an argument for remembering, it is the story of profound love in the face of unspeakable pain and a celebration of life, however fragile it might be. Which does sound very interesting, and knowing how powerful Han Kang is as a writer, I fully believe that it is an incredible book and worthy of a place on this list for sure. The next one is something that was on the long list for the National Book Award for fiction, but did not make it onto the list of finalists. It's The Sisters by Jonas Hassan Khemiri. And I fully admit I don't remember what this one is about. Here, let's read the description. An addictively entertaining family saga by a National Book Award finalist. Meet the Mikola sisters, Ina, Evelyn, and Anastasia. Their mother is a Tunisian carpet seller, their father a mysterious Swede who left them when they were young. Ina is tall, serious, a compulsive organizer. Evelyn is dreamy, magnetic, a smooth talker. And Anastasia is moody, chaotic, a shape-shifting presence, quick to anger. Ina meets her future husband when she's dragged to a New Year's rave by her sisters, only to suffer the ultimate betrayal. Evelyn drifts through life before embarking on a wild career as an actress, and Anastasia runs off to Tunisia, where she falls in love with a woman who, years later, will transform her life. Following the sisters from afar is Jonas, the son of a Swedish mother and a Tunisian father. Over the course of 3 decades, his life intersects with the sisters from a chance encounter in Tunis to the scene of a fighter jet crash in Stockholm. When Evelyn disappears on a trip to New York, Jonas manages to track her down and helps her to break the curse that has been looming over the Mikolas for decades. In the process, a shocking revelation changes everything about who they think they are. I don't know why I would have forgotten what that's about, because it does actually sound fascinating. I have heard mixed feedback from other people on BookTube, like commenters, who have read it and were not entirely impressed. Maybe that's why I forgot what the book is about, but it sounds interesting, certainly. So there you go. And the next one is a book that I have but haven't read yet. The Names by Florence Knapp. This was actually recommended to me by a bookseller when I was in Connecticut over the summer. I've heard a lot of really good things about this book, especially from Danny, who is that Bookish Bear on Instagram. He really enjoyed this book a great deal. The premise of it is that you have a woman who is giving birth to a son. And there are 3 possible names. There is the name that her husband, who is, I believe in the description, is revealed to be abusive, or at least domineering. Her husband wants to name the boy one thing. Her other child had chosen another name, and there's the name that she herself would like to give. So the book alternates back and forth, sort of spinning between three possible timelines, each one where she decided to give one of those three names to the child, and seeing what the different name would have as an impact on the course of his life and their lives as a family, which is a very interesting concept and something I look forward to catching up to for sure. The next one is A Guardian and a Thief by Megha Majumdar. This is also turning out to be one of the biggest books of the year. I've heard a lot of really great things about this book, and I desperately want to catch up to it. I don't have a copy. I don't have access to the audio, so I need to figure out how I'm going to do it, but I would absolutely love to catch up to it. It is an electrifying new novel following her acclaimed New York Times bestseller, A Burning, set in near-future Kolkata, India, in which two families seeking to protect their children must battle each other. A piercing and propulsive tour de force. So what I believe happens is one family steals from another, and the book sort of follows the repercussions of that theft for both families. And it sounds really good. I've heard so many very good things about it, and I can't wait to catch up to it. Then there is Wild Dark Shore by Charlotte McConaughey. I am actually listening to the audio of this right now. I'm not very far in, but Joel read it and really liked it, and pretty much every bookseller at Montana Book Company, which is my favorite independent bookstore, have loved it. So it just feels like there's a lot to recommend this book. It opens in a very mysterious way. A woman washes up on an island. She was on a boat that crashed, and she barely managed to survive. And you don't really know why she has come to this island or why she was seeking to get there. There are a lot of mysteries, and I admit, I am not someone who really likes it when information is withheld from you in order to make a story interesting as you reveal stuff, and this is sort of triggering all of the sort of irritation about that. So I don't know how I'm going to feel about this book, but it is very well written. Meanwhile, the family on the island, you have the father, his two sons, and one daughter, I believe, and you sort of move between the perspectives of these four people. And the family also seems to have some secrets, and I don't think it's, well, let's not go there. I was going to say something that happens in the first 45 minutes, but the father needs to hide some stuff before the woman wakes up, and let's just leave it at that. So there's a lot of interesting things happening. Everything is very mysterious, and I'll have to just stay tuned to see ultimately where it goes. But I have heard a lot of very good things about this book, so hopefully it will get over my sort of knee-jerk reaction to deliberately having information withheld by the author in order to make a situation seem mysterious and suspenseful. The next book is What We Can Know by Ian McEwan. And this is interesting because I didn't hear a lot of great advance buzz for this book. In fact, what I heard was mostly mixed to negative. And then once it was published, I really didn't hear much of anything at all. So the fact that it's showing up here could be an indicator of quality. If you've read it, I'd love to hear what you thought of it. Here's the description of it. 2014. At a dinner for close friends and colleagues, renowned poet Francis Blundy honors his wife's birthday by reading aloud a new poem dedicated to her, A Corona for Vivian. Much wine is drunk as the guests listen and a delicious meal consumed. Little does anyone gathered around the candlelit table know that for generations to come, people will speculate about the message of this poem, a copy of which has never been found and which remains an enduring mystery. 2119. Just over 100 years in the future, much of the Western world has been submerged by rising seas following a catastrophic nuclear accident. Those who survive are haunted by the richness of the world that has been lost. In the waterlogged south of what used to be England, Thomas Metcalfe, a lonely scholar and researcher, longs for the early 21st century as he chases the ghost of one poem, A Corona for Vivian. How wild and full of risk their lives were, thinks Thomas, as he pores over the archives of that distant era, captivated by the freedoms and possibilities of human life at its zenith. When he stumbles across a clue that may lead to the elusive poem's discovery, a story is revealed of entangled loves and a brutal crime that destroy his assumptions about people he thought he knew intimately well. Which does sound interesting. I think if not for the sort of mixed to negative advance buzz on this book, I probably would have been more interested in reading it, but maybe this is going to help me turn around my opinion, maybe try it. I don't know. Again, if you've read it, I would love to hear what you thought of it. Now we get to a book I had completely not heard of when this list came out. It's These Heathens by Mia Mackenzie. And I have resisted reading the description of it because I don't know why. I get a kick out of doing it while filming, so you get my most raw and honest reaction to the book and whether or not I would like to read it. Your opinion may be different. So here we go. Let's find out what this book is. Dear Lord, please forgive me for the sins I've committed and for the one I'm still planning to commit tomorrow. Amen. Where do you get an abortion in 1960 Georgia, especially if your small town's midwife goes to the same church as your parents? This is already really interesting. For 17-year-old Doris Steele, the answer is Atlanta, where her favorite teacher, Mrs. Lucas, calls upon her brash, wealthy childhood best friend, Sylvia, for help. While waiting to hear from the doctor who has agreed to do the procedure, Doris spends the weekend scandalized by, but drawn to, the people who move in and out of Sylvia's orbit. Celebrities whom Doris has seen in the pages of Jet and Ebony, civil rights leaders such as Coretta Scott King and Diane Nash, women who dance close together, boys who flirt too hard and talk too much, atheists, and even more shocking, Mrs. Lucas seems right at home. From the guests at a queer kickback to the student activists, I don't know why I said archivists, activists at a SNCC conference, Doris suddenly finds herself surrounded by so many people who seem to know exactly who or what they want. Doris knows she doesn't want a baby, but what does she want? Will this trip help her find out? These Heathens is a funny, poignant story about Black women's obligations and ambitions, what we owe to ourselves, and the transformative power of leaving your bubble even for just one chaotic weekend. I am going to see if I can get access to this book. I don't know if my library will have a copy. If they will, or if they do, I will put a hold on it immediately. Maybe I have access to the audio, but this is a book I feel like I really would like to read. So I'm going to leave this tab open so I can circle back to it once I'm done filming, because I think I need that book in my life. And that's why I like looking at these lists. It helps me discover books that I might have otherwise overlooked. So now I have a book that I feel pretty urgent right now to read. The next book is People Like Us by Jason Mott. Jason Mott won the National Book Award for Fiction for his previous book, which was called Hell of a Book. And this one is sort of a meta story. It follows two men, at least one of which has won a prestigious literary award. And the two men travel around. Let me just read you the description. People Like Us is Jason Mott's electric new novel. It is not memoir, yet it has deeply personal connections to Jason's life. And while rooted in reality, it explodes with dreamlike experiences that pull a reader in and don't let go. From the ability to time travel, to sightings of sea monsters and peacocks, and feelings of love and memory so real they hurt. In People Like Us, two Black writers are trying to find peace and belonging in a world that is riven with gun violence. One is on a global book tour after a big prize win. The other is set to give a speech at a school that has suffered a shooting. And as their two storylines merge, truths and antics are bound in equal measure. Characters drink booze out of an award trophy, menaces lurk in the shadows, tiny French cars putter around the countryside, handguns seem to hover in the air, and dreams endure against all odds. That sounds very interesting. I do actually have access to the audio of this book, so maybe I will need to prioritize that one and catch up to it before the end of the year. The next one is a book I was given an advanced reader's copy from Knopf, but I have not managed to read it yet. It's The Girls Who Grew Big by Layla Motley. You may know Layla Motley because she published Nightcrawling. She either wrote Nightcrawling when she was 19 or she published it when she was 19. I think she wrote it when she was 19. And that book was a finalist for the Booker Prize and blessed by Oprah. And so you have probably heard of her because of that book. In a very interesting turn of events, I feel like things have gone very quiet on this book, especially since it was published. And I don't know if that's just because there hasn't been as much of noise around the book as there was with her debut. I don't know if that's an indicator of people reading it and just thinking, like, kind of like the opposite of The Correspondent. But I do still want to read this for myself and see what it is like. It's a novel about a fierce group of teenage mothers in the Florida Panhandle. Adela Woods is 16 years old and pregnant. Her parents banish her from her comfortable upbringing in Indiana to her grandmother's home in the small town of Padua Beach, Florida. When she arrives, Adela meets Emery, who brings her newborn to high school, determined to graduate against the odds. Simone, mother of 4-year-old twins, who weighs an abortion in the heart of the South, and the rest of the girls, a group of outcast young moms who raise their growing brood in the back of Simone's red truck. The town thinks the girls have lost their way, but really, they are finding it, looking for love, making and breaking friendships, and navigating the miracle of motherhood and the paradox of girlhood. Which to me sounds fascinating, and I cannot wait to read it. Next is another book that I am very unfamiliar with, so I've resisted reading the description. You're going to get my real-time feedback on it as we go along. So this is The Colony by Annika Norlin and translated by Alice E. Olson. Here we go. And it's a mega bestseller in Sweden, so if that, I don't know if that catches your interest or not, but there it is. And here we go. Winner of the V Literature Award and Swedish Radio's Novel Prize, two of Sweden's biggest literary awards, The Colony is a gripping portrayal of contemporary society and its alternatives. Burnt out from a demanding job and a bustling life in the city, Emily has left town to spend a few days in the country. Once there, in the peaceful, verdant hills, down by the river, she encounters a mysterious group of 7 people, each with personal stories full of pain, alienation, and the longing to live differently. They are misfits, each in their own way, and all led by the enigmatic and charismatic Sarah. How did they end up there? Are they content with the rigid roles they've been assigned? And what happens when an outsider appears and is initially drawn to their alternative lifestyle, but cannot help but stir things up? A masterful blend of humor, emotion, unforgettable characters, and sharp social commentary, The Colony is a magnetic and deeply touching story about love, community, and the unfathomable power others and that others have over us. I feel like maybe I tripped over that sentence. Maybe it's confusing. I don't know. But I will say, even just leading up to that, I feel like These Heathens was much more of a hit for me. If you've read The Colony, I would be very interested in hearing what you have thought of it, but it doesn't immediately grab me as something that I would want to catch up to, being honest. That takes us to Tilt by Emma Paddy. And I have heard of this book. It has been in a couple of... somebody put it in their best books of the year so far at the midpoint of the year. Actually, it's time because it's right there on bookshop.org. Here's what they say. Annie is 9 months pregnant and shopping for a crib at IKEA when a massive earthquake hits Portland, Oregon. With no way to reach her husband, no phone or money, and a city left in chaos, there's nothing to do but walk. Making her way across the wreckage of Portland, Annie experiences human desperation and kindness, strangers offering help, a riot at a grocery store, and an unlikely friendship with a young mother. As she walks, Annie reflects on her struggling marriage, her disappointing career, and her anxiety about having a baby. If she can just make it home, she's determined to change her life. And I don't know why, but I feel like I keep forgetting about this book, but then every time I am reminded of it, it sounds very interesting. So maybe I just kind of need to fix that, because it does sound really interesting. I've heard good feedback from commenters and people who follow BookTube, so maybe I just need to make sure I remember it. Again, ignore my calendar. The next book I am so excited to see on this list. It's The Imagined Life by Andrew Porter. I was given an advance copy of this book earlier this year from Knopf, and it was one of my favorite books at the midpoint of the year. It is still one of my favorite reads of the year. I absolutely loved this book, and I really hope more people will discover it. It reminded me of the writing of John Cheever, and to me, that's a very big deal. It's a good thing, and it's such a good book. I have a hard time summarizing this book succinctly, so I will read the description on the back of the book. a taut elegiac novel about a man trying to uncover the truth about the father who left him behind. Stephen Mills has reached a crossroads. His wife and son have left, and they may not return, which leaves him determined to find out what happened to his own father, a brilliant, charismatic professor who disappeared on a wave of ignominy in 1984 when Steve was 12. As Steve drives up the coast of California, seeking out his father's friends and former colleagues, the novel offers us tantalizing glimpses into Steve's childhood. His parents' legendary pool parties, the black and white films on the backyard projector, secrets shared with his closest friend. Each conversation in the present reveals another layer of his father's past. Yet with every revelation, his father becomes more difficult to recognize, and with every insight, Steve must confront truths about his own life. Rich in atmosphere and with a stunningly sure-footed emotional compass, The Imagined Life is a probing, nostalgic novel about the impossibility of understanding one's parents, about first loves and lost innocence, about the unbreakable bonds between a father and a son. It's so good. It's so good. I really hope more people will discover this book. I hope it becomes a finalist when we get that shortlist for the Andrew Carnegie Medal for Excellence in Fiction. I just really want good things for this book, so I'm thrilled to see it show up here. The next book is Terrestrial History by Joe Mungo Reed. This is another one that I'm completely unfamiliar with, so let's see what I think of it, or what I think of the description. Hannah is a fusion scientist working alone at a remote cottage off the coast of Scotland when she sees a figure making his way from the sea. It is a visitor from the future, a young man from a human settlement on Mars, traveling backwards through time to try to make a crucial intervention in the fate of our dying planet, and he needs Hannah's help. Laboring in the warmth of a Scottish summer, Hannah and the stranger are on the path towards a breakthrough, and then things go terribly wrong. Joe Mungo Reed's intricately crafted novel expands from this extraordinary event, drawing together the stories of 4 lives reckoning with what it means to take fate into their own hands, moving from the last days of civilization on Earth through the birth of another on Mars. Roban lives in the colony, one of the first generation born to this sterile new outpost where he is consumed by longing for the lost wonders of a home planet he never knew. Between Hannah and Roban, 2 generations, a father and a daughter, face an uncertain future in a world that is falling apart. Andrew is a politician running to be Scotland's first minister. Andrew believes there is still time for the human spirit to triumph, if only he can persuade people to band together. For his starkly rationalist daughter, Kenzie, this idealism doesn't offer the hard tools needed to keep the rising floods at bay. And so she signs on to work for a company that would abandon Earth for the promise of a world beyond, in contravention of all Andrew stands for. In considering which concerns should guide us in a time of crisis, social, technological, or familial, and reckoning with the question of whether there is a meaning to be found in the pursuit of salvation beyond success itself, Joe Mungo Reed has written a novel of elegiac wonder and beauty. That does sound interesting. I feel like for me, this one would really depend on feedback from other people. So if you have read Terrestrial History, let me know what you thought of it. I'm inclined to pass, but maybe you can change my mind. The next book is Flesh by David Zalay. This is on the shortlist for the Booker Prize. I read it. I thought it was deeply fine. I did a whole individual review, so I will link that down below as well. And then we can move on to the next book, which is The Emperor of Gladness by Ocean Vuong. This book has had a lot of fans, including Oprah, and yet it felt like it's sort of dropped out of the conversation. So this could be a sign that it's coming back. It's going to be interesting to see what trajectory this book has. This is something I haven't read yet, so I'm going to rely on the description on Bookshop. One late summer evening in the post-industrial town of East Gladness, Connecticut, 19-year-old High stands on the edge of a bridge in pelting rain, ready to jump, when he hears someone shout across the river. The voice belongs to Grazina, an elderly widow succumbing to dementia, who convinces him to take another path. Bereft and out of options, he quickly becomes her caretaker. Over the course of the year, the unlikely pair develops a life-altering bond, one built on empathy, spiritual reckoning, and heartbreak, with the power to transform High's relationship to himself, his family, and a community on the brink. Sounds very interesting. I would like to catch up to it. I, myself, was not a huge fan of On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous. I liked it, but I think maybe it had been overhyped. But then I subsequently also didn't like a poetry collection of Ocean Vuong, so it's possible that he's just not a writer for me. And I think this book will be the test that either proves that to be true or reveals that it's not actually true at all. So, to be determined on that one. All right, we have one more book, and it's Good Dirt by Charmaine Wilkerson. Charmaine Wilkerson wrote the book Black Cake, which came out a couple of years ago. I believe was adapted into a series for Hulu. I did read Black Cake. I thought it was good. I didn't love it, but I thought it had a lot of interesting stuff in it. It's about a complicated family. I love books about a complicated family. So but I admit I really haven't tracked Good Dirt. I don't know what it's about. So let's find out together. When 10-year-old Ebby Freeman heard the gunshot, time stopped. And when she saw her brother Baz lying on the floor surrounded by the shattered pieces of a century-old jar, life as Ebby knew it shattered as well. The crime was never solved, and because the Freemans were one of the only black families in a particularly well-to-do enclave of New England, the case has had an enduring voyeuristic pull for the public. The last thing the Freemans want is another media frenzy splashing their family across the papers, but when Ebby's high-profile romance falls apart without any explanation, that's exactly what they get. So Ebby flees to France only for her past to follow her there, and as she tries to process what's happened, she begins to think about the other loss her family suffered on that day 18 years ago, the stoneware jar that had been in their family for generations, brought north by an enslaved ancestor. But little does she know that the handcrafted piece of pottery held more than just her family's history. It might also hold the key to unlocking her own future. In this sweeping, evocative novel, Charmaine Wilkerson brings to life a multi-generational epic that examines how the past informs our present. That does sound very interesting. Of all the books I was unfamiliar with, These Heathens is the clear winner for me. But I mean, that one sounds interesting. I did like Black Cake, so there's a sense of interest there as well. I feel like I would catch up to some of the other known ones as well, like A Guardian and a Thief, before I would think about adding that one to my sort of to-do list, or TBR, if you will. So those are the books that are on the Andrew Carnegie Longlist for the Medal for Excellence for Fiction for this year. And I would love to hear your thoughts on the list, what you are excited about, what you're a little surprised by, and what you think is missing. The Wilderness by Angela Flournoy, just off the top of my head. Audition by Katie Kitamura. Those are definitely things that could have been on this list. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on it as well. Let me know in the comment section down below. As always, I really appreciate your time, and I will be back. Until next time, happy reading.